and the moderator for today. And before we get into our panel, I've had a number of requests for some information about pandemic influenza planning. And I thought I would give you a few minutes of perspective on that, and then our speakers will be talking about a variety of preparedness and interventions for crises that may be relevant even to pandemic influenza planning. Our campus had a thoughtful plan when SARS started to spread around North America. We brought together a group of about 20 professional administrators and health experts, and as we planned for that, happily we did not have to do too much except to restrict some travel to certain areas. When that alarm died down, the committee that we had became quiescent until until April of 2005, when we started recognizing that avian influenza was going to present some challenges for us. And in August, we reconvened the group and have been meeting monthly. And during this 6 months of preparedness, we've had subcommittees that have worked on the administrative notification process and how we would communicate with the executive officers, the president and the regents, how we would communicate amongst ourselves and how we would interact with the Emergency Operations Center for the university. We've had our senior communications media staff put together media relations plans, a website, planning for how we would communicate during a crisis, and we've been using something called course tools to create both a immediate interactive web communication tool and also an archive of important articles and literature. We've had infectious disease specialists in the health service working on the plan for caring for a large number of ill individuals, activating the emergency modular health system, which includes an alternate care hospital if the hospital resources are overtaxed, vaccination planning, and safety planning in terms of the preparedness of our public safety apparatus. We've also tried to work on a plan to deal with housing issues. We know that during a pandemic, 1 out of every 4 staff might be away. The estimates are 25 to 40% of staff might be away either because they're sick or because they're taking care of family members or because they're afraid to come into work. And how would we keep the business plan of the university operational, and how would we keep academic operations functioning? The planning has been quite complex, and we've been using human resources, infectious disease, and other healthcare providers, and a variety of other administrators throughout the organization to do this planning. And we will have a report for the executive officers in September of 2006. Other universities that have been doing a really excellent job that I'm aware of are University of Minnesota and Penn State. And so I'm sure that if you're thinking about this as you're attending this conference, you would be able to get information from any of us. And in addition, the American College Health Association and the Center for Disease Control have both published their thinking about preparedness for university and college settings. We are going to be speaking one by one, and after each speaker talks for 15 minutes, there'll be time for question and answer. Rather than doing the questions and answers at the end, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers after each speaker. Our first guest today is Dr. Todd Holzman. He is presently the Chief Psychiatrist for the Disaster Services, Department of Mental Health, and Public Health for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's also a child and adult psychiatrist who's had a practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts, He has been a Peace Corps physician in West Africa and Liberia, and has been a volunteer with the Red Cross in Massachusetts, has also worked with Physicians for Human Rights in Kosovo, the American Jewish World Service for AIDS education in Ghana and Kenya, and has worked in tsunami relief in Tamil Nadu. So he has in India. He has a wide experience, and will bring to us his thinking about the disaster response in mental health. Thank you.
Thanks for the applause. I might just well sit down, not insult you. 15 minutes with 5 minutes for questions, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going, hopefully, to build on everything that we've all been learning throughout the past 2 days, and hopefully what I say will be fairly consistent with the very smart and erudite people that have gone before me. I'm going to try to limit it to pearls, okay? And I had a computer failure, but I have 4 slides that I'm going to ask your assistance in imagining. And it won't be as hard as you think, all right? The flight attendant coming here, we landed, and she said, you know, be careful when you open the overhead compartments, shift happens. And I think one of the things that we all agree on is that shift happens. I think some of the common issues for all disasters and catastrophes, whether they're natural or human-made, and interestingly enough, I was thinking about it during yesterday's morning lecture. The same thing is true for torture, people who are being tortured. What the victims, and I'm using that, the victims feel at those times are a sense of isolation, helplessness, hopelessness, totally being alone, no support, nobody around. You're alone, helpless, vulnerable. The incident or the torture or the disaster has the upper hand. That's what's calling the shots. You're hopeless and alone, helpless, bereft. The antidote for that is somebody else's human contact and compassion and support. That's the antidote. Everything else I say is just commentary, okay? So that's where we're at. When you get, how many people would like to help in a disaster or a catastrophe? How many would not? Okay. Even if you didn't, you'd have to. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what to do, what to expect, how to behave, and how to help. My first slide. Okay, I got this great color slide. Godzilla, tromping around the city with flames and smoke at his feet and fire coming out of his mouth, right? Godzilla. Hollywood has spent millions of dollars and worked for years figuring out how to terrify people, and they're very good at it. If you think about horror movies, what happens? Initially, the person that you're identified with is alone, totally oblivious to any danger, and you hear breathing, and it's quiet and everything else, and there's mysterious music, and you know that something is out there, something beyond belief. I mean, whatever your fantasies are, your worst fantasies, that's what it is. It's only when Godzilla appears, or when the monster appears, when the butcher appears, then you know what you're dealing with, and all of a sudden the tone changes. You have something to cope with. You have something to fight against. You have to deal with it. Everybody's still, oh, well, we got to get the air force. We got to get this. And then people get into the heroic phase, right? Remember those old grade B Hollywood movies? Doctors are up all night, and the nurses swabbing the brow, and in the middle of the night, can't. Oh, doctor, you've got to rest. I can't rest. And what do? They give me a drink. They knock a couple back. All right. Well, that's what I grew up on. I don't know if that's what you grew up in. So I wanted to be a cowboy and I wanted to be a disaster guy. Well, so I've come to learn that ain't exactly what happens. When you get to a disaster, there is organization. It is far more military than Peace Corps. Every disaster will have a critical incident, command structure, okay, whatever they call it these days. And it's to be followed. It's operational in a matter of hours or minutes or days at the most. An entire company, industry, firm is built to handle a disaster. And you got to know that that exists and that you respect that and you follow orders. Okay? The last thing in the world you want is a bunch of cowboys running around a disaster scene trying to do good and trying to be like those characters in the movie I was talking about. That just makes for chaos. I mean, it's not good. So there's an order, a structure. Did you know that the Red Cross owns the humanitarian relief to all disasters by charter of the government? Yeah, they own humanitarian relief. They are in charge by charter of the government. It's the law. They are in charge, the Red Cross. That's where all the emergency money goes, just to prove it. The government humanitarian relief money goes through the Red Cross. Other agencies are there, Salvation Army, blah, 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 a lot of other voluntary, non-governmental. But at times of emergency, Red Cross becomes a government agency. Now, so my advice to you is to get Red Cross training. Call your local chapter and get Red Cross training. Now, the Red Cross is far from perfect. The training is far from perfect, but it does a couple of things. One, you learn what you're supposed to do in a disaster. You don't have to be a mental health professional to be a disaster action volunteer. Red Cross also has disaster mental health. Generic, discipline generic, not psychiatrists, not social workers, not nurses, not psychologists, just disaster mental health. So you can do either or both. But it does a couple of things. One, you get certified. You get a credential. Don't forget, this is more military than it is Peace Corps. So you're now blessed. You have the certification to go to a disaster, show up on the scene, you say, hey, c'est moi, I'm certified. They say, thank you very much for showing up. I can see that you're a member of the Klan. No secret handshake, but welcome to the club. It also allows you, if you want to go out of state, they will send you there on an airplane. They will put you up, presuming the infrastructure exists, unlike Katrina. They will put you up. If there's a good earthquake, I mean, my first earthquake was in Northridge, California, and I stayed at some of the Marina Hotel at, anyway, Santa Monica. Not bad. They put you up, they feed you, they transfer you there, and they take care of your liability insurance. So you're covered. So you can just focus on being a volunteer. Most importantly, you know what to do. So what do? You get there. If it's the kind of a disaster where the medical stuff takes precedence, it does. By the way, Cheryl talked about it this morning, and others have. Disaster psychiatry, disaster behavioral health is different than other things in psychiatry, behavioral health. It's different. It's not therapy. It's not everything. It's different. It's unique. So just like medicine, a disaster scene, you know what they do in medical triage? A bomb goes off, building falls down, something else. Smoke is going. The guy says, okay, everybody who can hear me and needs medical care, stand over here. People get up. They stand over there. those are secondarily to be treated. They can hear, they can walk, and they can get there by themselves. The next question is, everybody who can hear me and needs medical help, lift your arm or your leg. You get the picture? And if it's a bomb blast, you can't trust that because it blows people's ears out. So you have to go around. And then they check to see who's not responding, and either they're gone or there's no help to be had or whatever. I'm also telling you that there is what is euphemistically called a, I keep wanting to say gentle, but it's not a gentle, but it's a graceful deterioration in care. So it's not the kind of care that you expect when you pull into the emergency room any day of the night. It's care that fits the circumstances. Behavioral health, we associate ourselves with the medical teams first. Scud missile attacks, sarin poison, all that. The statistics show that for every medical person treated in an emergency room or a facility, 4 to 5 people show up with somatic symptoms of anxiety or other emotional things. So 4 times the number of people who are treated medically are psychiatric, psychological, behavioral health, something along those lines, people who need care. You may have heard this unfortunate term, the worried well. They're not worried well. They're anxious, they're terrified, everything else, and if you treat them as worried well, they tend to escalate. They say, damn it, I'm not getting care. What do I have to do around here to get care? You think that hurts? Well, this hurts too. You think, then they get really anxious and panicky that they're not getting care, and they see that care is dwindling, so it escalates. Okay, so behavioral health, what we want to do, and here's how I earn my seat at the table with my medical colleagues. I say, look, I'm going to clear the doorway to your emergency room. I'm going to consult to you on people that you're seeing, which we'll get to, but also when people are judged to have anxiety, panic, terror, or they're saying, I don't know where my husband, my wife, my child, my relative, my friend is, I don't know, we're going to take them over here to this other area so that they're not burdened by the chaos, the blood, the sweat, the tears of the emergency room. They're not getting in the way of the emergency room, but they are being treated, screened by professional behavioral health disaster-trained people to see if they're psychotic, to see if they're suicidal, to see if any substance, but just to get a view of what's going on with them, and then to have them someplace where they can be calmed and psychological first aid can be done. Everybody know what psychological first aid is? Yeah, let me tell you what psychological first aid is. Psychological first aid is just what it sounds like. That is something that everybody can and should know how to do. It's not very complicated, it's not very technical, but it's absolutely essential. You walk up to somebody, hi, I'm Todd Holzman, can I help you? What's up? What's going on? Whatever you want to do. If they're upset, they're anxious, or anything else, you look in their eyes, you say, are you cold? Are you hot? Are you safe? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? What's the situation with your family? You get it? Just the basic kind of stuff. Are you physically okay? Let me take you someplace safe. If you're not okay, you need to be checked medically? No. Okay. Need a blanket? Thirsty, hungry? Okay. You might then want to ask, if they want to, what happened? How you doing? Something along those lines. I don't want to talk about it. Right. Be over there. I'll be over here. If you need anything, just, let me know. Wave. Let me go. I'll check back on you in a half hour, 10 minutes, whatever it is. Leave them alone. You respect their privacy. You don't try to be intrusive. You don't try to therapize. last thing in the world. Try to calm, reassure, make sure their basic needs are met. You try to connect them back up with family. Don't forget, family's going to become the emergency room, and your medical friends are going to send them to your house, you know, your room down the block. You're going to see if you got phones that you can call around to find out where it is, presuming there's an infrastructure. These are the things you're going to do. You're going to keep checking on these people, and then they might, some people will say, you know, I do want to, you know what happened to me? You won't believe what happened to me. And I wouldn't believe. You can't write what you're going to hear. You could not anticipate or write the stories that you will hear. Okay? So then they want to talk, you listen. And you listen in a way that, especially if you're a counselor, you know, certain things will ring true, but you're going to just, you say, well, people can look awful, very upset. They can look just terrified and to be numb, not be able to make judgments, can't talk coherently or anything else, and still be not crazy, but having a terribly difficult response to a terribly difficult situation. What's the fashionable word? A normal response to an abnormal event. It's a terrible response to a terrible event, and it's terribly upsetting, physiologically, emotionally, behaviorally, cognitively, in every way. So you want to keep that in mind, and you want to help them calm themselves. You want to offer them certain techniques about relaxation. I mean, that doesn't mean, say, okay, we're going to do relaxation exercises, everybody in a group. That may be appropriate, maybe not. You know, you want to individually tailor this kind of stuff. Okay. That's psychological first aid in a nutshell. If they need more, you want to connect them to places that will help them with ongoing care therapy, or if they need housing, connect them to the proper housing place. If they need to find out where their family is, Red Cross has these family care things set up so that they hook people up back together again. Basic stuff. This is all part of the heroic phase of a disaster. Everybody tends to pull together during this heroic phase. The community outpouring is great. The media is there. By the way, the command structure will tell you, you're not to talk to the media. Only our public communications person is to talk to the media. If I catch anybody talking to the media and kind of going off, I'm going to have your butt in my bag, because we don't want rumors starting. We don't want false information that may look true to you as a genuine, good-hearted person here. We certainly don't want you whining and crying about your own situation if you've been working for 10 or 12 hours and are starting to show yourself to get kind of worn out, burned out. Your judgment is starting to go. You haven't been practicing self-care. Oh, yeah, self-care. I always am fond of telling my colleagues who are so important that they think they're like the doctors in those grade B movies, you know, that have to be up all night and working late. I got 5 minutes. Working late. I said, look, I need you to be a professional. I don't need you to be another one of the people that we're trying to serve. You're starting to get irritable. Your judgment is starting to slip. You're starting to be a pain in the neck to the nurses. Not allowed. You got to go home. You got to take care of yourself. You got to get your family to pat you on the back and say, attaboy, we're proud of you. You need something to eat, something to drink. You need to sleep. And if you can't sleep, just stay there, look at a book. But you need to be out of here. Get the hook. I don't want you to be another one of my problems. I got enough to do with the survivors. Okay. What happens is people do get burned out. When we were in tsunami, all the kids that, for this agency we worked for, were helping out. The secretaries wanted to pitch in. They wanted to do, so they found themselves at tables and banks of photographs taken of people who were then put in mass graves. And the secretaries, these young girls, were taking people, relatives and friends, trying to identify pictures from these grotesque pictures, identify people. It was awful. Body handlers. It was awful. Talking about it with the staff, tell me your story, if they wanted to talk, was very important to them. If they didn't want to talk, fine. Next. It really helped. It really helped a great deal. When we got to a shelter, which was at a Catholic church that was back off the coast, the church survived the devastation of the tsunami. There were a group of children in one corner, a group of women in the other. The men, who were all fishermen, were out trying to figure out how they could get boats and stuff to get back to work. On the steps of the church were 3 doctors from the Indian Health Service with masks on, a nephrologist, a neurologist, and an internist, and 3 nurses, great, with the white outfits and the hats. Remember the nurses' hats and all that? I came up, with my wife, with the circus, whenever we go, where the circus comes to town, so everybody comes rushing. The kids, they're laughing, they have ice cream, and they're doing kid stuff together. The women crowd up, they want to tell their story. They push one woman up. She says, through the interpreter, I have 5 children. I was only able to hold 3. My 17-month-old and my 2-month-old were swept out of my arms. Oh, my God. We're standing there, a group of people. The women come around her. They start patting. They're talking. And then the next one wants to tell me her story. They want to tell me the story. My interpreter, the tears are worse than mine. The tears are coming down. So what we want to do is help our colleagues as well as the people, the doctors and nurses. I said, any concern about the emotional well-being of these people? Not at that word. He says, no, they're all right. Now, I say this because this is the natural tendency, even in our enlightened age, even at home, is to take care of the medical stuff, and behavioral health really has to make its way to the table. Okay? When we're there, they love us. And they'll always call for counseling. As soon as there's 2 tiers, every Red Cross disaster worker and every nurse and doctor will say, get the psych. Come on over here. Cries, tears, whatever. Anger is the other one. Irritability, anger, get the psych. And it's great because then we can help them out. Okay, I'll stop. But from Katrina, we had, they were picking in Massachusetts. We were expecting 2,500. Thank God we only got 230 guests from Louisiana, where our plane. They would pick people, mandatory evacuation. They picked people wet and put them on airplanes. Didn't tell them where they were going until they were 45 minutes from their destination. We set up a hangar, set up the whole operation, picture IDs, Corey checks if they didn't have IDs. National Guard medicine, and then state psychiatric doing screening, and then we set up an outpatient psych for all these people. It was absolutely great. Questions?
We're not going to use cards for questions.
Okay. No, just holler out.
So we have time for 5 minutes of questions.
Yeah.
What would you say about training all students to provide the kind of psychological first aid?
You have to repeat the questions here.
What would I say about training all the students to provide psychological first aid and all that? I would say I think it's a pretty good idea. No, seriously, I would say it's great. And everybody should volunteer to do that because what the hell? All that happens is you learn something, you get certified, and then if something happens, you can feel that you have some idea of what you're going to do. And the people who need you and want you will say, oh, my God, thank you for showing up. Before you do a thing, you're getting attaboys, So do it. Do it, because it feels, let me tell you, the heroic, everybody feels good about helping out. You know why? Well, not only is it a professional thing, and health professionals tend to show up. I don't know about financial planners, but health professionals tend to show up. Even they worry about their family, but their family tends to understand or something like that. So part of self-care is making sure your family's all right. But health people show up. So yeah, you should do it. It feels good. You're not helpless. I have this illusion that I'm not as helpless when I'm doing all these things. It's a drop in the bucket, but so what? It's my drop, So do it. Another question. No other questions. I'm brilliant. That okay? Last chance. Last chance. Okay. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Holzman. That was very interesting and I think informative. All Our next speaker is Reverend Roger Pohl. Roger is the executive director of the Ecumenical Center and International Residence here at the University of Michigan campus. Though it's not affiliated with the university, many students rely on the Ecumenical Center for support. Roger's been the director since 2000. He was born in Chicago. He taught in the Philippines, and he's been in Zimbabwe and Zambia, in Southern Africa, in China, and Japan, in Asia, in Mexico, and the Honduras, and in Ecuador and Central and South America. So he's had really a worldwide experience as a minister in the Church of Christ. He is also the he's the president of the Association of Religious Counselors that works closely hand in hand with the Division of Student Affairs here at University of Michigan, and has a great deal of experience in supporting students, and in particular today he's going to be talking about working with international students in settings of crisis and disaster and loss.
The evening that comes to mind as I want to begin talking about working with international students here at the University of Michigan, the evening that comes to mind was that evening of September 11th, 2001. Students had just arrived on campus. We at the Ecumenical Center were going to have our first community dinner with the 50 international students who live in our building that Tuesday evening. We had all been watching television all day, just mesmerized and horrified by the events that happened. We gathered with probably 40 of our 50 students for a meal together. Sitting down at big tables put together, so we were in a big circle. And we didn't even know each other's names, many of us, this was our first time together. Students from about 28 or 30 different countries sitting around the table. And we began, after we had shared a meal, we began to just reflect about the events of the day and went around the table asking everyone to share. Students from Asia felt far from home as a disaster was unfolding before their eyes. I especially remember several of the Muslim or Arab students who were seated around the table. One, a young Muslim student from Bangladesh, and his first words were, "This is not Islam. This is not the Islam of love and community that I have grown up with in Bangladesh." Another student, a Palestinian student, she said, "I utterly repudiate what has happened here today. I totally disagree with it." But she said, "I've also seen reports on television that in Palestine there are some people dancing in the streets." And she says, "Knowing the suffering of my family and my people, I also understand why some people are dancing." Another woman from Morocco shared her shock and her despair. We ended that evening after probably an hour and a half of reflecting and sharing together, getting to know each other in this intense crucible of experience and emotion. We ended in a circle of community. I shared some of Dr. King's words about how we're all woven in an inextricable web of community and destiny together. And then some of the words of St. Francis came to mind. Make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is despair, hope. In the weeks that followed, we tried to respond on a couple different levels. One was with students, we simply said, please talk with us. Tell us what you're feeling, what you are experiencing. Especially, we said, if you're experiencing something negative, if something happens, and especially, again, living here in southeastern Michigan, where in Dearborn, just half-hour drive away, the largest either Arab or Muslim community in North America lives. And so there's a lot of concern about what the kind of backlash was going to be. And so we really tried to especially check in with students one-on-one in the weeks and months after 9/11. We went with students and encouraged them to all kinds of things going on campus that helped us discern and explore the meaning and the significance and what had happened and why it was happening. And so that led to a lot of discussion. And then throughout that year, we did a lot of programming that really tried to explore in a lot of different ways what all we were experiencing. We did a lot of interfaith things. Rabbi came during the High Holy Days a couple weeks after September 11th. Our student from Bangladesh invited the Graduate Muslim Student Association to have their iftar once a week, the breaking of the fast during Ramadan. And so during Ramadan, they gathered every Thursday evening for prayers and then for a meal after sunset. Lots of one-on-one conversations were a part of that time together. I also, working through ARC, the Association of Religious Counselors, which for the university is the grouping of religious chaplains, religious professionals of all faiths and religions working on campus with students. We helped on the evening of 9/11, late that night, to speak at a candlelight vigil on Central Campus with thousands and thousands of students present. Also, campus religious professionals through ARC have access to the dormitories, and so there were just countless meetings and listening sessions and interpretive sessions for people together. Working with international students in time of crisis on a campus like the University of Michigan, international students bring a lot of typical student problems and yet a lot of particular problems and issues as well. Far from home, often feel isolated. There are language problems and barriers. Food, culture, support systems are missing. Those are realities that are with international students all the time and are especially accentuated in times of profound crisis. International students live with a lot of pressure, high family expectation, family pride, honor, face, sometimes family economic situation back home depends on their success as a student here. International students often speak about the pressure they feel, how they study till 3 in the morning when they know that their American counterparts are done at 10 in the evening with their studies, and a lot of it is because of cultural and language barriers that they need to deal with. International students, I think we all have trouble talking about depression, but international students may not even have that particular word in their vocabulary. They may say, I feel sick, I am tired. Medicines, and especially with meds from Western healthcare, may be very unfamiliar and seem like a confirmation of failure to them. We have worked out here on the U of M, and I think I'm about at the end of my time too, with the Office for the Vice President of Student Affairs, a response system, what was this morning called a command structure to be able to respond in times of crisis. If there were to be a total power outage or something like that, we have an arrangement with the university administration so that we can go and meet with them and know where to learn what our role is in coordination and in tandem with the university, so that then we can go out and work with the students we know and are already working with on campus. Most crises are not on the scale of 911, thankfully, or Katrina, but who knows, with avian flu or other kinds of things, what may be coming in the future. And so we're in a lot of conversation with the university about how we will respond in the future. I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Any questions?
Different kind of outreach to the international students. Would you say that some of them don't have the word profession in their vocabulary? Is there a way that you interact with them to try to help them to identify if they are feeling stressed or anxious or depressed?
You have to repeat questions.
The question is whether there are other ways that we have that we try to find from international students if they are depressed, if that word is not in their vocabulary. I think within our community, which is only 50 international students, much of it is by word of mouth and through roommates, or people get to know each other pretty well in that community. I know that here at the community at large, one of the signs is often that a student is beginning to fall behind in course credit hours, and so the International Center begins to sense that a student is getting into trouble, and there may be a depression or some other personal crisis that's at the heart of that. But sometimes it's things like that that are the signals more than anything else. We do different kinds of sessions. We had one last week about acculturation and difficulties of communication across cultural and language barriers, and led to a lot of discussion about students saying, you know, we came here feeling like we were the best and the brightest from our country, and our professors make us feel stupid and like losers. And a lot of that is because of language barriers and cultural barriers. But just beginning to open up the questions, all of a sudden those feelings come out. We had a program with students with disabilities on campus who came and met with a group of international students, and very quickly the international students began to talk again about their difficulty talking. One student was talking about how when I first got here, I tried to call up and order a telephone. The person was so rude to me and made me feel so stupid because they couldn't understand what I was saying. I don't know. So, I mean, almost everything leads to a discussion on a feeling level pretty quickly. Yes? Do we have a subset? We're just off campus, right by East Quad on. Oh, okay. We have 50 students who live in our building because that's how many apartments and how much room we have. Our programming and what we advertise is advertised to all 4,500 international students on campus. So a lot of our programs go a lot farther than that around the campus. We probably work with a subset of about 500 international students in one way or another in any given year. Okay.
Given that international students often have experienced trauma previously before coming to this country, or maybe more at risk of that than the general student population, and that they're experiencing a stigma in seeking out help, does the university or the counseling services or whatever, or you have any plans about how to target international students in a time of a crisis, being in a population that may be more at risk?
Right. I think our last speaker from Counseling and Psychological Services can maybe speak to that some, and I'd let her do that. If I could, in closing,
Yes.
just to put a wrap on the piece that I've done here, of those 3 Muslim students on 9/11. Around that table that first evening. One, the student from Bangladesh became very involved in our community. The student from Palestine became very involved in Palestinian justice issues on campus, and so really was a student activist and poured a lot of her energy into responding to 911 and everything by being deeply involved. The woman from Morocco, who had worked for the United Nations in women's issues in Morocco and was here doing graduate study, became so depressed every time she turned on television, every time the radio was on. The images of people from her part of the world were so negative. She just could not bear to be here. And as much as we tried to reach out to her and support her, in December, at the end of that semester, she left the University of Michigan, flew back home. The student from Bangladesh wrote a letter and asked us to put it in our newsletter. And so Sadat Shami said, talking about that first evening, barely 2 weeks after I arrived in America, the tragedy of September 11th occurred. Being a Muslim myself, I didn't know what to expect, but within the walls of the Ecumenical Center, as well as the greater Ann Arbor community, I found voices of comfort, tolerance, and compassion. During the evening that day at the dinner table in the Ecumenical Center lounge, we found strength in each other. We are all unique in some way, yet at the end of the day, we're all human. If only everyone in this world understood this simple fact, maybe the world would be a better place. That is our hope as we work with students. Thank you.
Thank you. That last question was about how we do work with different international groups and whether we try to work in their language and with their specific issues. And our international center at the university does have a social worker, and our counseling services is extraordinarily multicultural. And our health service is, while not very multicultural in terms of its staff, is very attuned to the various ways that stress manifests itself in different cultures. And we often spend a good bit of time trying to help individuals who come in with a headache or a stomach ache from a culture where depression or anxiety is not something they can acknowledge, and help them redefine that as a psychological issue. And we also, during planning for crises, do work with the national groups, for instance, the Korean students group or the Chinese students group or the other appropriate student group to try and find advocates of students that can work with their fellows who are in distress. So those are some of the strategies that we use. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Lynne Rose now from our counseling service. Lynne has been with the counseling service for over 10 years. She's both a licensed medical social worker and also a certified social worker, and has been one of the early workers in the concept of having a crisis management group that can go immediately upon crisis to a setting where students can get the kind of counseling and support that is necessary depending on what has occurred. So with that, I welcome Lynne Rose. Thank you.
I feel like the pressure's on or something. And let's see if we can, he said, press the button. Huh? Oh, okay, good. I guess what I'd like to say first is that I'm a licensed social worker. So I'm a clinician, I'm a practitioner, and every day at the Counseling and Psychological Services Office, we respond to crises of our students. We have a walk-in time from 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night every day, and a variety of us, all of us as staff, take our shift. And so responding to crisis is something that happens on a daily basis in our office. So what I want to talk about today, though, is sort of in a bigger picture of what we do when something happens on our campus that affects larger numbers of people. And this can be anything that you would define as a crisis. It doesn't necessarily mean 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina. But unfortunately, on any college campus, we have students who die from accidents, tragically from suicides, car accidents, skiing accidents, all sorts of things, who maybe have alcohol poisoning. There are lots of things that happen to our students here. And Counseling and Psychological Services has been, and I believe will continue to be, probably on the front lines of responding to this kind of tragedy on our campus, as well as the larger issues. Of course, we were involved with 9/11. We've been working with student groups from the tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, and et cetera. But on a smaller basis, crisis and tragedy is not always big as we look at these kind of big disasters. Can I ask, is there anybody here from a counseling center? Oh, good. Hi. Oh, cool. So, practically, what I'm going to talk about today is how we at CAPS, and I'm just going to use that, Counseling and Psychological Services, we're CAPS. And I'm very sorry, I have a cold, and so I hope my voice will stay with us here. But I just want to talk about sort of how we came to developing a crisis response team. And I think, in all the years I've been at CAPS, and I was also at Wayne State University in Detroit, I think that this plan and how we've developed this has really been effective and is working. CAPS has, for over 30 years, responded to campus crises. But I think what the key difference is now is that we have a planned approach. In the past, we sort of reacted. Department heads, the police, residence hall staff would call us and say, you know, we need someone to come and help us with what's happened. And so I remember in my early years at CAPS, before we had this crisis response team, our director, Todd Holzman, if we saw him coming down the hallway, because he doesn't usually have time to be coming down the hallway, we knew that something bad had happened. And then he would sort of see whose door was open, and whoever was available would go out and try to do some kind of crisis intervention. Basically, the foundation of that would be how we have been trained. If we're licensed social workers, clinical social workers, we also have psychologists on staff. So I think we would provide the crisis intervention that we knew best from our discipline. And let me say, we did good work. We did good things. But when in 2002, 4 of us went to the critical incident stress management training. This is a very specific program. It was a 2-day intensive training, and 4 of us from our staff went and participated in this. And what was, I think, the most important result of it was we came back and started to really meet together to plan and to adapt what we've learned so that we could start responding in this planned, coordinated way. That when something happened, the crisis team would be activated and we would have a protocol, we would have a procedure so that we could respond in what we have found, as the best way we possibly could. I don't know how many of you might have taken this CISM training. Are some of them seen what this, yeah. I would really recommend it, along with the Red Cross training. This is a specific training that we found to be really dynamic and really, I think, meets needs. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it because that's 2 days of training. Hopefully you have it on your handouts, but you can see in general what the basics are. There's some different things. The diffusing occurs within 8 to 24 hours. It's short. It's for smaller groups. The debriefing usually occurs within 24 to 72 hours after the incident, is longer in duration. But the goals are basically the same. We want to do, I think what Dr. Holzman said was provide psychological first aid. We want to get out and really in a planned way reduce stress, start the recovery process, and then assess for other kinds of help that might be needed. So, like I say, I don't want to spend a lot of time with that. You have that, but I wanted to say that these 3 models of intervention is what we really use. We follow the protocol pretty specifically. Sometimes we have some flexibility. I think the main thing to know is that this model is not psychotherapy. It is not group psychotherapy. It is not therapizing. Okay? It's a very structured conversation or discussion that comes out of this training, and we follow pretty much the protocol to provide a crisis intervention. The one thing that I didn't mention here as I try to put this together, one other way that we respond to crises is through our website. I think it's critical, it's crucial that especially if you're on a college campus that you have a website that is up to date and provides help and support right away. We provided information, the aftermath of 9/11, the beginning of the war in Iraq, now 3 years ago, the tsunami in December 2005, Hurricane Katrina last summer, and most recently when our campus was jolted with the tragic suicides of 2 of our male students. We try to immediately get information, get support, get resources right on our website so that students can access that. And I think that's becoming more and more part of what we do. This action plan, the Associate Dean of Students Office, but particularly Stephanie Pinder-Amaker, who's in the room today, we work very closely with the Dean of Students Office. They or the director of CAPS will receive the information regarding what's happened. It's usually from a variety of sources, public safety, maybe the psych ER, the hospital, housing staff, academic departments, etc. As soon as our director knows what's happened, what kind of crisis has occurred, he activates us as the crisis response team. And we drop everything. This is what needs to be done, and we get together in a room and really begin to discuss what has happened, define what our plans are. Again, so we're not just reacting. We're going to, in a very planful way, begin to discuss what to do. This idea of concentric circles, I wish I could draw it, but you know what that is. I'm not very good at math, but circles are circles. So what we do is we sort of start out with who is the person or the individual or the group that is most effective, and we just keep drawing circles Is there a significant other? What about the parents? What about fraternity or sorority people? What about roommates? What about people on the floor in a residence hall? What about specific groups and multicultural? Absolutely. We've had, unfortunately, events that have happened and tragedies that have happened in our international student community, and we specifically will get with the leaders of the student groups and different maybe departments to be very mindful of the specific needs of our international student community when a crisis hits. So we really start to say, okay, who's most effective? Who do we need to get to the most quickly? And we really define that plan. We really, make it work. And then we begin with Stephanie, with Sue Elkin, who's the Dean of Students, our director, our team. We really start making those connections with departments, with the International Center, with student groups, with residence halls, and saying, this is what we think. We'd like to do a diffusing. We think it would be really crucial to get the roommate, to get the people on the floor, to get the sorority people together. We will send a team out tonight. Can you help us with the logistics? We need a room. We need a place to meet. We need to get the word out. Can you send out an email? Can you start notifying that this will be available and that CAP staff will be there to help with the process of recovery and really begin to do some intervention for the groups that are affected. So it's the other part of this is that the crisis response team has now grown. We have other people that have been trained. So it's always one of us that are the first responders that do go out and we work together as a team because we know about the model, we know about the protocol. The other thing that happens is that Todd will notify the CAP staff because, again, we're on a walk-in crisis intervention time every day. And we know that when something happens, somebody will want and need to come in on a one-on-one basis and meet with a counselor to get immediate support. We always have that available, but Todd needs to tell us and tell the staff to be sort of prepared because there are times when we could get 2, 3, 4, 5 students who come in, all affected by something that has happened to their friend, to their boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, and we need to be ready. And we need to sometimes kind of double up on our shift times so that we can be prepared to help. Once we go out and do this, I know I'm going to get to 5 minutes. I hear the paper ripping. And that's really okay because I'm almost done. Isn't that great? I think the next part is once we go out and do that, it's really important that we as a team, whoever went out, whoever was part of the planning, we meet together to evaluate what it is that happened. What worked really well, what was the response of the students, staff, faculty that we provided the service for, what further needs are there, what didn't work so well. Sometimes things don't work as well as we would hope. And most important, what do these groups or individuals need for follow-up care? We don't just go and sort of do this thing and then, okay, bye. We've done our thing. We're always available. We keep in touch with the student groups. We keep in touch with the students. We always want to provide follow-up care because this, for many students, as we know, the post-traumatic stress disorder, it takes 6 months to a year for that to really present itself, and we want to be there and be available. I think in my years of working in a counseling center and other agencies and places, I'm not as young as I look. Just want to see if you were awake. I think this has really worked well, and that we're a team, and that we work so well. with our Dean of Students office. And I really believe that this planned, sort of coordinated event, protocol really is providing some really necessary and important service to our students, staff, and faculty here at U of M. So that's my gig.
Do you have any questions?
Hand shot up over there.
I appreciate the CAP's role as a front line in responding to tragedies on campus. I'm referring to that CISM format. In the first 8 to 24 hours after the suicides of the students, what specifically did you do to meet one-on-one with your at-risk population? And how did you decide who was at risk? How did you determine who needed your help? And then what sort of specific feedback did you give about the email that you sent out to the school practitioners? You say you have an open door policy.
There's a lot of questions here, and I hope you can all hear her.
My main thing is, how did you determine who was at risk, and how did you specifically reach out to those people? What one-on-one contact did you have with them? What feedback did you get on an email? Was that effective? And when you have an open door policy, how quickly does someone actually meet with a counselor?
Okay. You're talking specifically about the recent
What crisis has with the recent
suicide.
Yeah, not general.
Right. Again, the crisis response team, when we found out that there had been a suicide, we met. We began to identify who was most affected by the death of this students, unfortunately, and began to work with liaisons and plan what student groups did we need to go and provide assistance to. And there were lots of different people that we needed to provide assistance to, as also the faculty and staff assistance program, because there were unfortunately faculty and staff that also had some pretty traumatic experience around this. So I don't think there was any email sent out saying, gee, we're going to do this thing. It was very specific for the student in that particular department, drama, small kinds of groups, that this was going to be, this kind of assistance was going to be provided, and there would be a group meeting. And we did. We sent teams out that night.
My question is, how do you determine who was at risk at that point? Who were the groups that you met?
The groups the groups that we met with were, as I said, the department. He was a student. This one in particular was a student in a particular small group. He was also involved in some drama. So those are the people that we really got with. Parents, I believe, through the Dean of Students office. We have to determine sort of who were his roommates. Did he have roommates? Who were his immediate friends? Did he have a significant partner? Those are the things that we had to determine, and we get that information through the Dean of Students office and work together to try to determine who is, as you say, at risk, who needs to be seen. It's really a coordinated effort. I can't give you a 1, 2, 3, but it really is sitting down and saying, okay, what class is he in? What school is he from? Who might be involved? Is he living in off campus? Who are his roommates? See?
Essentially a checklist.
It's basically sort of a checklist. That sounds cold. It's not really like that, but it's really trying to determine who would be most appropriate to reach.
And the other part of the question was, how do you handle this crisis walk-in situation?
Oh, thanks. I lost that part.
Could you repeat it?
Yeah. How do we handle the walk-in crisis situation? Like I said, our office is open from 8 to 5, and every day we have shifts. During that time, all of us usually are on three hours once a week, and all our staff participates. In the afternoon, we usually have 2 people because that's when it gets most busy. And then on Tuesday nights, I forgot to say, we're open until 8 o'clock, so we also have some evening time. If a student comes in and says, and often they do, they'll say, I need to talk to somebody. I either need to talk to somebody now, or, I really need to talk, or they'll come in and they are visibly upset, and our front office staff will say, would you like to see a counselor now? So as soon as a counselor is available, they're seen. That day, that hour, that 15 minutes. Now, sometimes if I'm on, a shift, I've just had a student come in, another student is now right behind. The front desk will let our clinical director know that another student is there, and some assessment is made whether or not they can wait or whether they need to be seen right now. And she'll either meet with them or she'll ask some other staff to meet with them if it seems like this is urgent, they need to be seen right now, not 30 minutes from now.
I'm afraid there's, one.
Oh,
Go ahead.
and there's Stephanie.
I just wondered, as you move to this more formal systematic response, did you encounter any challenges with the larger university that expected you to respond in your previous methods?
So, Stephanie, why don't you answer that? Yeah, we did. Old habits die hard, and there was this, past experience that, a professor or somebody could just call and say, come out right now, we need you right now, come to my class. And we would run and do that. And now we're trying to say, and this is usually where Todd, is our liaison person that will say, well, can you tell me what happened? Can you, let's see what would be the most effective use. So originally, I think there was some real shifting and there was some real resistance to us sort of taking the lead and being the professionals that we are and being depended on as the professionals. I don't think it took very long, actually. I think the main, housing, psych ER, some of the Department of Public Safety, and some of the departments, in School of Education, and I think they're shifting now where it's not. I think they really have responded well. It took a little bit to kind of shift, but shift happens.
Hey! Very good.
Having come a full circle with shift, is this called bull shift? Very good. I'd like to thank our speakers today, and now I'd like to ask Dr. Greden to come to the podium to conclude our conference. That was great.
It was great, but I must admit that that's probably the hardest introduction that I have. Shift happens, and bull shift, and then I come up. Anyway, it is, I think, a pleasure to close this out. There's part of me that doesn't like that, but I have learned in these 2 days. I have 3 things that I'd like to do in these remaining minutes. Several minutes, just basically to look back and make one observation, one comment. Several minutes to look ahead, and then a few minutes just to think. And the looking ahead is the piece of asking your input in a collective fashion about what we do, if anything, in the future. But first, looking back, I'm going to take the liberty of doing this in a big picture way. I did it yesterday morning briefly. When this started, it started because of an awareness of the scope of the problem of college mental health issues, and we specifically focused upon depression almost just to have some focus, just to be able to channel attention, and because it statistically, epidemiologically, is the largest problem. So that became a target. In that first year, we learned the problem is huge. Every campus faces it. Every entity, I think, struggles with it. This was looking at scope of the problem and best practices. And I walked out of those 2 days with the realization that we had an awful lot of work to do to really improve what were best practices. The sense that I had was that our systems, and that included available personnel, it included money, it included integration, and it probably included preparation and a plan. Our systems weren't adequate to really address this. At the same time, I sort of felt, all right, we've accomplished some thinking, let's now go back and do these things. In planning year 2, the realization was let's do some more focusing, because in year 1, same words kept coming up. One of those words was stress. We've heard it again this year. Second one was alcohol. Third one was sleep. So we focused year 2 on those 3 things. How did they contribute to depression? And I think the conclusions were they did it a lot. If there is a take-home message that I had at that point in time, and I tried to say that then, it was that we needed to go back home and stop the, well, you're depressed because you're drinking too much. Well, no, you're drinking too much because you're depressed, or vice versa. And to treat everything always at the same time, that we needed to intervene. That again led to this word integration. How do we manage to work together? The third year, we addressed something that kept coming up in year 1 and year 2 as standing in the way, and that was stigma. And I think to give a summary of an entire 2 days on that one, the feeling that I had was stigma remains. It's a burden. It's painful. We had many examples that were presented by speakers, but I also, and maybe this is a reflection of me, Jim Abelson's very nice comments this morning, being an optimist, I also felt, one, I saw positive things. The data suggested it was going downward. We were improving. Younger generations, better educated, et cetera, were all starting to diminish this stigma. And to be positive, I saw that as good. I also felt that there were many clues about how we might counteract. And I left with a conviction that I had when I walked in, which is you don't counteract stigma by changing names. You don't counteract stigma by sort of being fluffy and hiding things. You also don't counteract stigma by kind of building separate systems. You do it by knowledge, by accuracy, by realism, by hope, and by ample use of what I've come since then to call the frown factor. If somebody says something inappropriate, it's not to be ignored or to be giggled at. It is to be frowned at and to say, that's actually not what it is. The proper terminology is such and such. It's not crazy, nuts, whatever else. And I think we all can and should be using that with our colleagues as well as with those that we work with in everyday settings. This year, we focused upon crisis, trauma, loss, and I think I'm going to not actually do anything to try to summarize what was presented because it would be foolish. Jim did a great job of summary for yesterday, and I think most of the participants in this room have been here today. But I want to make an observation. All day long, this has been gnawing at me, and this afternoon it kind of gelled. I think I even said it to one of the people earlier this morning. I spent 4 years at Walter Reed in my military time. And intriguingly, this was a different day and age. This was a Vietnam time. And there were principles that were taught to us as military doctors at that stage. And one of them has been coming back to me in the story and the anecdote that was presented when Todd will know this probably fairly well, but I was taught about between 1939 and 1942, wasn't my era, but this was history. The United States Army was actually losing more people to what they were then calling traumatic war neurosis than they were able to induct for a brief period of several months. They were people were just being discharged. What were the reasons? They couldn't sleep, they were panicky, they were anxious, they had intrusive thoughts, they were responding to noises, they basically were depressed, some were suicidal. Traumatic war neurosis. Intriguingly, it was such a problem that President Roosevelt actually appointed Menninger and Grinker, two psychiatrists at the time, brought them into the military as honorary generals and said, figure out what to do with this. What did they do? Well, they were brilliant, right? They went back and looked at prior data. Intriguingly, in World War I, when it was called shell shock, because then the assumption was it was the trauma on the ground that was producing this neurological problem. Same symptoms, by the way, same profile. They had developed a principle of actually looking at what worked and what didn't, and it was called PI, proximity, immediacy, expectancy. You treated people as proximal to the scene as you could when you had a crisis, a trauma, as immediate, this is what Lynne was just presenting, and with the expectation that we're going to get back to functioning to normal, you're actually going to go back to doing what you were doing. We're going to help you if you need it, but this will work. This will work. And I think PI has been popping through all day long because I've been hearing it with different terminology. And all of a sudden it hit me that the symptoms aren't changing that we're hearing about today. The profiles, perhaps not even the causes. We've learned a lot more. You heard that from Dr. Charney. We've learned a great deal, I think, about what's maybe going on in the brain. But whatever we call it, CISR, whether we call it PI, we need to take this back home and start using it. And I loved the little exchange. I think it was you. Do you think students should learn this? You know, and whoever was answering, yes, I think it's a good idea. It was Todd. I think we should probably actually be putting something like that into action. These aren't greatly difficult principles to learn. And why I think that is that in the process, I think it would enhance awareness, diminish stigma, create a little clientele, if you will, to help us should we ever be unfortunate enough to have any major tragedies on our own at any campus. So the lessons that we've learned throughout history shouldn't be lost. As I listen to Oklahoma City, Texas A&M, Seton Hall, I think each group is facing the same thing, and it's a shame if we have to keep discovering them. So we also heard things about preparation and planning and resilience and all of those things. This has been, I think, in those respects, remarkably informative to me. I really have found the day very valuable. I think one more comment just to make is that someone, as I was skimming through just the notes, asked, what about model programs? I was hoping that there would be some really super model programs with evidence-based documentation that are working and that you could share with us. When the planning committee got together and tried to put this into action, we couldn't really find any yet. So now I'm going to repeat for the third time. I think we have a lot of work to do yet. We need help to do that. We need help from our administrations. We need support. We need money. But I think we've got to be the leaders. And in that respect, I'm back to maybe Jim Abelson or my genes. I'm confident that we can. I think we are making progress. I actually think the situation and the scene is getting better. I've been in the mental health field for a long time, and it's improved. I think we're actually seeing progress and understanding. People have asked, how did you get this administration and this campus to support a depression center? It wasn't hard. They actually grasped the importance. They almost became champions. What was hard is finding money, and I think that's our challenge for all of us. So with that, I'm going to actually do a quick shift, and then I want to come back. The shift is something I did last year at the end of this. Should we, when we did year one, we didn't plan any kind of continuity. Year two emerged, year three now. Should we do something like this again? If so, when? If so, what topic? What kind of structure? It's been suggested that if it's too much of a burnout for those of us who do it, it is a lot of work. Maybe we could do it with different timetables every other year. Maybe we should, no matter how much burnout, stay with it. As Todd said, give me a drink and we'll just go on next year. Somewhere along the way, I would like your advice on behalf of all of the program committee people here. They would also like this. We decided we'd ask you. So any quick observations? Is this something that, are we running out of themes now, or should we keep going? Way in back.
I'd like to see more student involvement. I'd like to get their take on the whole picture and learn from them what's needed and what can be done.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Go ahead.
I
The most of it, by the way, yes.
So a couple things I would like to see is offer CMEs in nursing and medicine. I think that you'll get some of that multidisciplinary that way. I also, it's probably not appropriate for your next year's meeting, but as I've been sitting here, keeping some of these conversations from the health and safety point of view, and I'm thinking that this needs to be carried to a multidisciplinary conference. Medical and psych need to be talking to each other, and how are our roles going to integrate in this master plan that nobody has published but we have to look at.
Yes.
And then thirdly,
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to a U of M lanyard on my ID badge.
Okay. Trish, are you writing these things down? Other. And by the way, just to point out multidisciplinarity, he is a family physician, and there were 4 or 5 that I met. There are a number of nurses sitting in the audience that I know. We've tried to push this and I think make it available, but I think it really deserves even more emphasis. There's never enough of that. So psychopharmacology. Yes, it will very much. Yeah, incentives always work. Psychopharmacology, is that what you were talking about? Yeah. Let me use that as just a brief introduction to something Bob suggested earlier today. He basically said maybe 2 days on the same topic is too much. Maybe we ought to have something that integrates them, but do a little switching and a transition. I mean, for example, you could have best practices in psychotherapy and best practices in psychopharmacology for some focal problem, and it wouldn't have to be just restricted to one problem or something. I mean, et cetera. Is there any sense on that? Is that diffusion of topic, or is that actually something that would make it more interesting? Yes.
So in that sense, that could become overwhelming. The idea of something that would integrate would probably be very good, and I echo again the interdisciplinary approach, including licensed professional counselors, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, all of the people trying to figure out a way to work together in a seamless fashion so that we can provide the best care for our constituents.
Somebody, go ahead, yes. Now this is amazing because maybe it was you last year if you happened to be here, but last year somebody said, how about a handoff issue of the passing the baton, because when students are leaving school to go into college, university settings, that's a difficult time. And maybe we ought to have some focus on that. This is second year. Well, these are good suggestions. I think, take those just as inputs and suggest that if there are others, use email, pass them on, and I think we'll have to do some deliberating. But today, Dr. Winfield and Dr. Pinder-Amaker were sitting in the auditorium downstairs, and they said, well, what's going to be the theme next year? And I said, have we decided what we're going to do next year? These help. I mean, listening to at least the people here, there is clearly a need to continue discussing these topics at whatever level. I'd like to close by especially thanking the speakers, the participants, the planning committee, and to really acknowledge the support staff and the group that did the behind-the-scenes work. Trish Meyer, who's sitting up there, and And also all of you, because I think you're the ones in the, if you will, the area where all of the action is occurring. All of the people who go back home and have to deal with these in student health settings and counseling services and psychology clinics, et cetera, are the ones who really are doing the work. And I'm struck by it's a tremendous array of talent, altruism, passion, dedication, and leadership. So thank you and be safe. Thanks.
Good to meet you, Lynne.
Good to meet you, Roger.